Welcome, welcome. So today I want to talk about why it's important that we learn and understand our history and what is the importance of it. Because if it wasn't important, then they wouldn't be trying to hide so much of it and conceal it from us. When you know your history, it empowers you. You can take pride in something, especially if you come from a great history. And as black people, we come from the greatest civilizations that ever walked this face of the earth. We have some of the greatest history there is to be known. And a lot of us don't have no idea of it. The only thing we know is our history here in America and what they present to us as our history. And like, how are they going to tell us our history? That doesn't even make sense. And that's why it's important that we need to start having more teachers that look like us. Because, first of all, that does something to a child to actually be learning from someone that looks like them. Anyone, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, this and that. When your teacher is someone that actually looks like you can resonate more, you can relate more, you can connect to more. So that's very important. But you got to understand, here in America, as black people, they conceal so much of our history, and it's for a reason. You should understand that by now, that they don't want us to know our history, and that's for a reason. They wouldn't be trying to hide and conceal so much of it and only present the history that they want us to know. Everything about slavery and this and that. Now you got to look at some of the heroes that they try to present to us. Everyone that we celebrate in America, as far as black people that we celebrate, are people that they killed. How empowering is that? That all the heroes and the people that you looked up to was killed by this American government or fighting in the struggle. Very rarely do they ever show us someone that actually overcame them or won. Like a lot of us really don't know about the Haitian Revolution and how they fought back against slavery and actually won. Of course, the Europeans, they did what they had to do to mess up that country and not let them strive because of such. But that's very important, and a lot of us really need to know about that, because that was one of the most successful slave revolts. But we need to be stretched on beyond just American history. This isn't our history. This is just a brief, tiny fraction of it, a few hundred years. Our history goes back thousands and thousands of hundreds of years. Like, we were the first people to walk this earth, and we were the greatest civilizations that walked this earth. And we got to start choosing the history and not letting them choose the history that's presented to us and our children and the next generation. Because if we don't start teaching our history to this generation, that's going to get lost. Especially now in the age of information, well, the age of misinformation, I should say, with the internet, where anyone could just get on there and say anything and people blindly fall for it or believe in it. Because someone can say some slick words or say some things that sound good, and people don't critical think and like to do things on their own. But when you hear about the Italians, they take pride in their history, and the Greeks or the Irish people take pride in their history. Very rarely do you hear African people talk about, or black Americans talk about, how they take pride in their African history, because we feel we're not connected to it. And we absolutely are. Absolutely are. Every race comes from Africa. Period. Hands down. There's no doubt about that. But we all spread out throughout the earth and spread. And we, black people, before the slave trade and all that, we were travelers of the earth before it. And we were already in America before any slave trade. Just look at the Olmecs, if you want to know about that, down in the south of Mexico, Southern America and all that. The Olmecs. That's when we roamed over here. And there's some stuff in the Grand Canyon too, where a lot of comedic stuff is in there. That's why the Grand Canyon is shut off. They don't let you go up and down. There's some underground tunnel or something. I can't explain that exactly to you because there's not a lot of information about it. But there's pieces that are there that you could find pieces and scraps of it sometime in a couple little books and a couple things on the internet. It should at least pique your interest to go further investigate. But I'm going to tell you why it's so important for us to know about our history. When you know that We were the leaders in everything in the world almost 2,000 years ago. You take pride in that, and that empowers you. That makes you want to strive to be like your ancestors. You know what I'm saying? That makes you want to be like, wow, my ancestors did this. They did that. Wow, they were great. That makes you like, well, I can be that. But instead, when you got someone that took your history, took all your culture, and presents you with your history and presents you with a culture, now they're making you look at them like they're great. And in truth, I remember back when I first started like learning about African stuff and learning about that, like even before I even started learning about it, you used to hear people talk about like this, oh, the black man started this, the black people started this. I just think like, man, they be tripping. Like they just think black people started everything. But now I'm doing my own research. It's true. And it's surprising, like, wow, we really did. We were the leaders in sciences, the arts, mathematics. Like, we built pyramids, stuff that can't be built to this day. And, like, all this new age science and things that they're discovering, they're not really discovering anything or finding out anything. All they're doing is going back and figure out shit we knew thousands of years ago. And because whenever they, like, between religion and the slave trade and this and that, they put a gap in understanding and, like, put a halt to like human progression, period. Because they just couldn't believe it. Like, how are these people we think are savages and not doing this, everything that we think is the right way or civilized? They're doing the complete opposite, but they're like striving so much more. And it's like, not to say that we were perfect people. No people on this earth is perfect. But we strove for perfection, and what we were doing was beyond light years of anything else any other culture are doing. Especially when you look at Kemet. That was the greatest civilization that ever walked the face of the earth. And that was us. That was us, black people with skin like me and you. They came in all shades. But like, when I grew up, I used to think Egyptians were like the Arabs and the like Middle Eastern people, because that's what they presented to us on TV and all that. They made that seem like that was the history. And not to say that Egyptians, that wasn't a period of an Egyptian history or Kemetic history, because that was. There was lots of takeovers in Egypt. Like that empire stretched over thousands of years. Like the dynastic period was almost like 3,500 to 5,000 years, arguably. And then there's pre-dynastic period. We could go on and on. Like the Sphinx, that's probably almost 10,000 years old. And so just think about that. That's almost 10,000 years old. But when you think of Egypt or Kemet, America has been like the world leader, the world power for what, only 200 years? 300 years? Not even 300 years, maybe 200 years, if that. They were in control and power for over 10,000 years. Between Kush, then they migrated up to Egypt. They made that like the center, because Kush, Ethiopia, whatever you want to call it, Nubia, that was like the home base for us all. That was our stronghold. That was the home. So every time, like in Kemet, that was like the grand jewel. That would be like for black people in America, how like Atlanta is now. That's where everyone is thriving. That's where the culture, the music, everything is like thriving. That's where the Mecca is for black people, kind of like in America. But that was Kemet back then for Africa. And everyone would come throughout the world, would come there for learning. That was the center of learning. Whether you wanted to know about the arts, the sciences, the rhetoric, mathematics, religions, writing, everyone came there for learning. Jesus, Moses was in Egypt. All these Greeks that they think is great, Pythagoras and Aristotle, Socrates, and all these people, they came to Egypt, Kemet, for learning. And then eventually, like you also got to think about too, over that 10,000 years, there were so many different empires. Well, I say the 5,000 years, the dynastic period. There were so many different empires that ran Egypt. But whenever we pushed the culture forward, whenever there was like, learning was like pushed to the limits, like sciences and everything, that was during the Nubian periods, when the people of Kush, of black skin, ruled over the land. But then there would be like an invasion where the Persians came to take it over. Eventually the Ottoman Empire, the the Greeks took it over, eventually Rome, and then, you know what I'm saying, right now it's under Arab control. And like, just think about that. All of our history right now, as far as that, is under their control. They have all of our culture, our arts, our artifacts. They have control of that. We only get bits and pieces of it. So it's like we don't even get our own history. They have control of our shit. And that's totally wrong. And we need to start fighting for that. Because there's so much we can learn from it. They have control of all of that. And all these new technologies and things we keep discovering. We think all these new scientists are figuring out and discovering. No, they're not. They're studying our shit and figuring out shit from it. But it's like they don't have no connection to that. So a lot of that they can't even understand. And that's why it's important for us to gain back control of these things. We have a connection to that. And if we continue to learn, take pride in that, we can do that. Like just like the Moors. What they learned, they had to learn when the Greeks took over Egypt. The Moors start recognizing like, hold up, they had to take over that and like start teaching when they took over Spain. They learned from Greek, but they know that, oh, the Greeks, they're just have our shit from Kemet, from Egypt. And they couldn't do nothing with it for real. They could do somewhat, but not too much. So when the Moors figured that out, they learned from the Greeks our own history from Kemet. That's when they brought it to Spain and pushed Europe out of the Dark Ages. Europe was a piece of shit back then. When we was ruling the earth, Europe wasn't shit. But because we such loving people, we start teaching them and let them learn and everything. Eventually they took over, and next thing you know, enslaved us, and then took our culture, took our history, and made us ignorant to our own shit. Made us ignorant. So now we look at them as all these great teachers and great thought leaders and this and that. And it's like, yo, no, that's us. And we got to start taking pride back in that and learning that. Because, like, there is so much, like everything that's going on in the world right now is a result of ignorance, of us not knowing ourselves and our ancestors and knowing our history. So we're just the blind out here leading the blind under European society. They're making their reality based on their thought process. And we got to start regaining our knowledge and start trying to make reality, make a vision of the world with our thought process, how we want it to be. Like, it isn't natural the way we're living. They're tearing apart the fucking earth. And we're falling right behind it, trying to live up to their standards. This isn't what we supposed to be. We're trying to live to their standards and thinking that's the way to be. But meanwhile, turning our noses at our own culture, our own people. When like they had the African clothes, like we're not even speaking our own language, and language is very important. We don't even have our own names, and we just give names to our children. It's not without even a thought process. Names have power. Names have meaning, and that's why we got to start like renaming ourselves and give our kids meanings with names. Names have power. Every time you speak to someone, you're speaking a word of power to them. Just like when you're talking to them, you're casting spells. You got to be careful what you say. That shit touches your subconscious. Just because you're not conscious of it doesn't mean it doesn't touch your subconscious. And your subconscious is 95% of control of your life. The things you don't think about. You're only 5% conscious of the things you actually do. And everything around us, whether it's symbols or colors or this and that, we're living in we're under their control because we have no idea about none of these sciences or these psychological things they're playing on us because they got all of our knowledge and history and using it against us and keeping us ignorant to it. So, in order for us to move forward, like we're at a point of like, it's getting critical. I'm sure they probably say this in every age, every bit of period of time, like as far as our people, like, oh, if we don't recapture our history, this and that, it's going to be the end of it. But like, look around you in the world now. Like, I seriously believe, like, if we, especially with the internet, in the World Wide Web, in this age of misinformation, we really got to recapture and learn our stuff because it might be over after this. And next thing you know, like they can change everything. And we don't want that. And another thing too, we got to stop looking at Africa as like people don't want to know where they're from and this and that. Like they realize all these different African countries, that's because of colonization. Africa is Africa. It's one continent, but you got to look at it as almost like one country, period. Like someone on the East Coast in New York and someone in California, you're still a black man no matter what. Now you got a little different slang, move a little different, cultures just a little bit tad different, but you're still all in this one body, this one continent, this one body. We're still all the same. You got to look at Africa the same way. And it's so sad how much they colonized it and got all them different African countries looking at each other differently. Not even realizing they're all the same and all came from the same source. We all don't look at just, oh, that's Nigeria, that's Ethiopia, that's Tanzania, that's Egypt, no, it's all come from the same source. Of course there's going to be different areas and they got different languages and different things like that. But it's all from the same source and it's all one group of people for real. And we got to not let that colonization get to our heads over there. Get to our heads here, I mean. And have this separatist attitude. No, we're all one. But yes, it's time for us to start learning our history and regaining control of our history. Because it's very important. Very, very important. And when you know your history, you know what you came from, you know the greatness where you come from, it empowers you. And if you're empowered, you're invigorated, that's the further you can push things. That's the further you feel like, oh, you know what? Let me stop bullshitting around. Let me stop being a victim. I know where I came from. I know I came from greatness. So that greatness in me, I got to pursue and exemplify my greatness. So I could be a part of history so the people after me can see where they came from. Not this mediocrity where we is right now. The only thing we know is what they present to us. The heroes they want us to be as sports figures and entertainers. We're much more than that. Quit letting them dictate our heroes and our great leaders. No, we're much more than that. We need scientists. We need mathematicians. We need all these things also.